Hello, TTB community. I am Bob Demena, and here with me, as always, is the very unremitting Elliot Shibley.
Unremitting? What is that?
It essentially means you're a hard worker. Here, let me find the definition. So, never relaxing or slackening. Incessant.
I think, is that a compliment? Or is that like a backhanded compliment? Is it like a strength and a weakness?
Well, it could be a strength and a weakness, but in this context, it is a compliment. It just means, you're a hard worker. You're never relaxing. You're just working,
Yeah.
essentially. But in one regard, I guess that could be a negative. You don't want to work too hard. You don't want to be too unremitting. You need to relax a little bit.
Yeah.
So, I guess you could take it however you'd like. Maybe sleep on it. Let it keep you up at night. And figure it out for yourself.
All right. Well, I'll take it as a compliment because that's the only way that'll maintain a relationship. So today's guests are Amanda and Ryan of the World Wanderers podcast. They both fell in love with traveling on their first big backpacking trip around the world in 2011. And since then, they have traveled all over the world together. In our conversation with them, we talk about how they took their work online and that enabled them to travel more full-time and more sustainably. We also discuss why they created the World Wanderers.
Yeah, and before we get into the podcast, though, I want to briefly run through our marketing and our social media. So the Traveler's Blueprint Community Group, private Facebook group, building that up, having a lot of fun doing it. If you like the rapid fire questions that we're discussing at the end of each podcast, you actually will have the opportunity to answer some of them for yourself. I have them set to pump into the community group, and it's really interesting to see what our followers are saying. You can subscribe anywhere you're listening to this, whether it's through YouTube, you're watching us, hello, or through the podcast, subscribe to that channel. And know that if you go to our website, you can get a free cheat sheet when you sign up for the newsletter, which will allow you to keep up to date on our future episodes, past episodes, and things like that. So the other big thing that we have right now that I'm really looking forward to are the video tutorials on how you can become your own travel agent. Elliot has been working unremittingly, there we go, full circle, on finalizing these videos. They are going to be beautiful.
It's been really fun working on.
I love to give you a little bit of hindsight, they're going to be, I don't know how to describe it, but like toony, right?
Yeah.
So you're going to follow cartoon version of Bob and Elliot and have them explain to you how you can be your own travel agent. So the final production, the final videos are really going to be fun, and we'll give you information on how you can actually view them in the future. So I think that's it for me. The other stuff is just, you can book tours with us in Philly through Keshler on our website. You can keep up to date with our Travel Around series where we have the 6-person podcast episodes each month. It's the last Friday of every month is a new episode. So we have a lot going on. Check out our website if you want more information on us. But today, I think we're just going to go into the podcast. So without further introduction, please give it up for Amanda and Ryan of the World Wanderers.
Welcome to the Traveler's Blueprint. Start designing your next adventure.
Amanda and Ryan, welcome to the Traveler's Blueprint podcast.
Thanks so much for having us.
Yeah,
we're excited to be here with you guys.
Yeah. So I'm excited to talk to you because you have a pretty extensive background in something that Elliot and I never got to experience, and that's being a digital nomad in your early 20s, maybe earlier. I guess we'll find that out. But what we really want to talk about today is essentially, your lives and how you made the transition into becoming a digital nomad, what steps you took to prolong your travels, and kind of get an idea of maybe how any of our listeners who might be in the early stages of their travel planning can do it themselves. So I guess, let's start off with, take us back to the year that you two decided to hit the road permanently or for an extended period of time.
Yeah, for sure. So it's a bit of a long kind of windy path and story, but I think a good place to start is to back up to 2011. And that was our first backpacking trip together. And so this, for context, was right after we graduated university or college. We'd both finished with business degrees, and we were like, let's take a 6-month break before we get, big kid jobs, get corporate jobs, and kind of dive into life. And Ryan and I had both traveled like separately with our families at that point, but that was really like the first time we were on this like big adventure, and we had no responsibilities, and we'd saved money, and we finished school, and we just got to go out and kind of have this gap year. And it was this really eye-opening experience where we got to see people doing all sorts of stuff around the world, and we got to see all these amazing things and really have this experience of feeling free and not bogged down by the stresses of day-to-day life. Like the biggest stress is, where are we going to sleep tonight? What are we going to eat today? What are we going to go see? And that was a huge privilege to be able to experience that. And after 6 months, we came back to Canada. We were living in Calgary, Alberta at the time, and we got an apartment, and we got these jobs because we were like super broke at that point. We had no money, and we just started working. And I think pretty quick into that, both of us were like, is this it? Like, is this what we're going to do till we retire? We were as 20, 22, 23 at that time. And it very much felt like the complete polar opposite to this experience that we'd had while traveling. Traveling was exhilarating and exciting and free. And these jobs were great on paper and they paid well, but neither of us felt fulfilled. And we were like, okay, we got to do something different. And so we decided to go traveling again, because that was the thing we knew that gave us freedom. And I'll let Ryan take the story from there.
Yeah. So we worked from 2012 to 2014, just in kind of corporate jobs, like young professional type jobs. And then in 2014, right at the start, and a little bit earlier, I suppose, we made the decision. We were like, screw this, we're going traveling. We'd like saved up money, we sold all our stuff. And we really didn't have a plan. Like, we didn't really know what we'd be doing in 6 months from them. I think the obvious solution was, oh, probably just going to do 6 months of backpacking and then come back and live again. But we went to South America, and then kind of over time, like reconnected with that feeling that we felt the first time we went. So feeling like alive, feeling excited to wake up every morning, and feeling like just like there's so many options, so many things you could do. And I think for us, during that 6 months, we came to the realization that we didn't want to go back to the way that we had been living before, or even the place we'd been living before. We wanted to try to find a way to integrate this like adventure, this feeling of, enriching, fulfilled life that we had traveling with a career. We didn't want to go back and do the thing we did before. So when we came back to Canada after that, we ended up moving to where we are now, Canmore, Alberta, which is kind of a touristic mountain town, a place where we felt excited about being. And our plan at that time actually was, okay, we're going to go spend the summer in Canmore. We're going to get like service jobs. And then we're going to get English teaching jobs in China. We're going to move to China, which never ended up happening. But we got back here and really fell in love with it. Like, I worked as a barista and then as a cook. Amanda worked at a retail store, a Lululemon store. Mm-hmm. And just a really cool community of people who were in a similar place, like people early to mid 20s from all over Canada, all over the world, who had come here just because they felt like it was a great place to live and be, at that point in your life. And so we were here doing that for
15 months,
like just over a year. Yeah, before a cool opportunity came up for me to get a job in Atlanta, and we moved to the States. But kind of during that period, we'd come to the realization of like being, whether it's digital nomad or location independent, whatever you want to call it, we're like, okay, we're going to find a way to make money traveling. And we had started our podcast, and we were kind of just focusing on learning more about that. And when we moved to Atlanta, that was kind of the start for Amanda of working as a nomad. I had a job in person there that was a temporary contract. And then after that was when we started as nomads. So that was the start of 2016. We flew to Asia, and we were like, okay, we're
digital nomad
now.
life.
And so we've spent stints places. Like, we spent 6 months in Mexico City. We spent 6 months in Panama, but we haven't really lived anywhere permanently since then.
Okay. So what did you do as your job while you were nomading around?
Yeah. Do you want to
Yeah,
start?
yeah, for sure. So for me, it was actually really interesting because Ryan had this work visa in the States and I didn't have a work visa. So I did actually ask Lululemon to transfer me to a store in Atlanta. And they're like, you're like the bottom of the totem pole here. Like, we can't transfer you. You can't get a work visa doing that. And I was like, okay, well, crap. And I had been working part time for a yoga studio and doing management and digital marketing and stuff like that. And so the studio owner and I chatted and I was like, can I stay on? You know, I'm happy to do whatever it takes to make sure it works with time zones and phone numbers and that sort of thing. And I'd worked for him for, I guess, 2 years at that point. And he was like, yeah, like, I don't want to lose you. And so I went into my stint in Atlanta with a little bit of income coming in from this yoga studio. And then, you know, we had the World Wanders that was growing. We were starting to build that. And from there, I built out a yoga business. I'm a yoga teacher and I work with yoga teachers, helping them with their businesses. I started a podcast, started working with teachers one-on-one. I've slowly built that up to working with other studios and doing a lot with that. But that was kind of the main thing I was doing at that point. And then along the way as well, I did lots of other things to supplement my income. I mean, I've taught English through a company called VIP Kid, and I've also worked as a coach for a company called Praxis. I did that for 3 years. And so there was a lot of like building business pieces, doing freelance work, doing contract work. I mean, I've done contract website design, I've done lots of contract coaching work, and just kind of doing what I needed to do to balance like bringing the money in and then also continuing to pursue what I was excited about. Because I think what we really figured out on that trip to South America was like, okay, so we could continue working jobs full time that we don't love, saving all of our money, being really frugal when we're at home, and then spending all of our money on these like 6 month stints. But that feels like very unsustainable. And I turned 25 on that trip. And I remember just thinking, like, 25, like, what am I doing with my life? You know, like, I'm just going to work jobs that I don't love, save money, spend all my money, have no savings. Like, that just doesn't feel like it's sustainable in the long term.
It's a
And so
quarter
we
life
really,
crisis.
yeah, I know
Definitely.
for sure. Like, I definitely went through that 100%. And I call it my, like, I took my like life U-turn. Like, I was on a certain path on a highway and I was like, F this, I'm done with this. And I took a U-turn and went a different direction. And, yeah, I think we just were like, how can we make something sustainable that lets us do the thing we love, which is travel, and then also lets us have a fulfilling career? Because we realized that we really, for us, needed both. You know, just working with no, or just traveling with no obligations didn't feel completely fulfilling, and being at home working jobs that weren't fulfilling also wasn't serving us. It was kind of like, how can we find the balance of that? But Ryan has like kind of a different, we've done like definitely stuff together with the World Wanderers, but has also a lot of different work that he's done.
Yeah. So for me, when we were in Atlanta, I had a job at a nonprofit that was based in Atlanta. I was doing marketing and operations work there. And then during that time, we had signed our first like legit sponsor for the World Wanderers. So we were like, okay, we're going full throttle with this. And while I was in Atlanta, I was also part of a program called Praxis, which Amanda just mentioned a little bit earlier, that helps young people start their careers. And so I had the opportunity to start as a coach right after that. And so Amanda did as well, where we would just work one-on-one with the people going through the program as kind of mentors for them, like helping them kind of set what their goals are, talk through problems that they were experiencing on the job hunt, and then working in their like first professional jobs, which was a really, really cool opportunity. And so when we did an 8-month stint in Asia as we were kind of like figuring out how to be,
Nomads.
productive while living in like tiny studio apartments while trying to be tourists in Asia. And was doing that, was doing the World Wanderers, and then was doing freelance podcast editing for a couple people. And then through that work with that company called Praxis, I kind of just built good relationships with everyone there. And then so when we came back to Canada in the summer of 2017, they actually offered me a much greater expanded role. Being Canadian, you can actually have like a full-time job, but wink, wink, it was like a full-time job.
Full-time contracted job.
Yeah. So
Yes.
I spent almost 2 years working remotely full-time. So we kept the World Wanderers going, of course, but I was basically, just working a full-time job, but being able to do it from wherever. So we spent a winter in Mexico City. We did some time in Guatemala. We spent some time in Charleston, South Carolina, where they were based, and did, that kind of life. So that experience of not necessarily like entrepreneurial life, but actually more of like a traditional job, just traveling. And then in about just over a year ago, I left that job and went back into freelancing. And so I'm doing freelance podcasting, editing, and working on our podcast as well now. So I kind of experience like all sides of it, from the more entrepreneurial side to the freelancing side to a more traditional employment type side.
Yeah, that's so something that I gathered from everything you just said is that these, you don't need to, if you're looking to become a digital nomad, you don't need to automatically think like, I need a job in travel. There are tons of different options for you, and you can now, I think, with the way that the internet provides us with a digital version of almost anything. And so for someone to become a digital nomad, I think it's important to look within yourself, and understand what your skills are, and then explore those skills in a digital way. How are my skills being offered digitally? And then move in that direction, and then bring that with you on the road. Because I mean, how many different jobs did you guys have, and different outlets did you explore that allowed you to travel around the world? And I already kind of knew this, but in my early years of trying to understand what it meant to be a digital nomad, I automatically thought like, they have a job in travel, whether it's travel blogging or travel writing or travel podcasting, whatever it is, they're a travel author. But that's not the case. I mean, you could do anything that allows you to sit on the computer and make money. You could do it on the road, and then fund your travels. And so everybody has a skill in some way, and we're fortunate enough to grow up in a time when, I think, our generation is very privileged to grow up in this era when we have the opportunity to take a step back and remove ourselves from the traditional path of a career, where you had to go to a university and get the degree and get the job and go to the office and repeat until you're dead or you retire. We really have this incredible opportunity to take our skills and use them as we please, and seek a company who operates, if you're living in the United States, they could operate in the UK, but you want to live in Asia. And that's doable. It's so doable now. And I just find that to be incredible.
Yeah. And we actually do a series on our show of kind of breaking down some of the, people, what are people doing as they've been able to build these work and travel lifestyles? Because like you said, if you go on the internet, you go on YouTube, you kind of think like, I mean, you just, the people you encounter being like, you can learn how to live a laptop lifestyle. Like, I'm making 6 figures, drop shipping on Amazon. Like, you think you have to like sell something dumb on Amazon, or, you make money by selling people this dream of working and traveling, and like it's a pyramid scheme basically.
Or you have to be like a travel blogger,
travel influencer.
Right.
But
influencer.
People do so many things. Like, we have a friend who, she lived in Japan for a long time, and so she speaks Japanese well, but she actually edits scientific papers by Japanese scientists, and she makes like really legit salary doing that, but just does it, on a paper by paper basis while she's traveling. She just reads them, learns about the science, and then edits any English errors. We have friends who teach English. We have friends who are more entrepreneurial. We have, there's such a huge spectrum of things. And I think it does kind of speak to like a different trend, regardless of the, the travel side of it. Just even living at home, if you want to stay where you are, like, you can introduce so much more like flexibility and freedom and authority over your own life because of the options we have. Right. To be not feeling like, hey, I'm stuck in this job, someone tells me what to do all day, but like I can have like 4 different jobs and I make good money doing that. One's more entrepreneurial, one's more creative and artistic, one's more just there to make money, whatever it is.
Right. Yeah.
I think this conversation is really interesting. And I think right now this pandemic is really highlighting how many people have the ability to work from home. And it's also highlighting the people that don't have the ability. Like, a lot of service jobs, obviously, you're not going to be able to work from home. But a lot of service jobs they're translatable to everywhere across the world. So if you're looking for a job in the service industry, if you speak the language, you can probably do it somewhere else.
Right.
But I
Yeah.
think looking at statistics, there was I think a third of Americans, I don't know about Canadians, sorry, are able to work from home. And I think that is on the high end, but still, that's 1 out of every 3 people have the ability to have a digital nomad lifestyle or a better work-life balance. And I'm noticing now that I really like working from home in some regards, but it feels more like college, and you have the flexibility to front load your work and get it done, and then you have a greater, maybe even a 4-day weekend,
Mhm.
and then you just get back to doing your work. As long as it gets done, you're fine.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and everyone's job's a little bit different, but yeah, I mean, there's obviously a lot of like crappy things that are coming out of this pandemic, especially as travelers. But I think the silver lining is that more people are getting this experience of working from home because, I mean, we've been working like pretty hard to try to debunk this idea that you have to be an Instagram influencer or a travel blogger to be able to work and travel. Like if you have the dream of working and traveling, but you're passionate about something that's not related to the travel industry, I think that for a lot of people, and not everyone, of course, but for a lot of people, it is possible to maybe pitch to your boss about working from home. And hopefully, there's a lot of people who kind of see these opportunities more, maybe more bosses that are open to it now. And I think it'll go both ways where like, there's going to be a lot of companies that are like, okay, this has been like the roughest couple of months. Like, we need you guys back in the office. But I think there will be a lot of places that realize, oh wow, we actually don't need people in the office.
We don't need to pay for this extremely expensive office space in a
Yeah,
major city,
yeah.
right? Like it's such a huge expense for so many companies.
My company's literally talking about that right now. We rent an office in Manhattan.
Oh, that's probably crazy.
Incredibly expensive. And now it hasn't been occupied for 3 or 4 months, and we have had business as usual.
Mm-hmm.
If I was the owner, I'd be contemplating whether or not that property's worth it. But I mean, so for someone, to be able to work digitally, if there were a lot of ways to do this before coronavirus, there are even more now, because the companies that did not have that to offer have now figured out ways to offer it, and we're only going to see that expand. And I think it was Facebook actually that I saw started to have opportunities that allowed people to work from anywhere in the world. So they're starting to expand who they hire. So you don't need to be living in Silicon Valley anymore to get a job at Facebook. I believe
which is good because it's so expensive.
Right. So
Yeah,
if you have the skills and you have what it takes and you're qualified to work at Facebook and you're living in Florida or Alberta or the UK or Italy, and you send in your resume, you can get the job. And that's so incredible. And that is absolutely 100% where the world is going. It's only going to be easier to be a digital nomad over the next 5-10 years.
Bob, if there's anything that you and I have learned from this pandemic, minus the meetings, the in-person meetings that some of us have to have, you've worked from home for 3 months.
I've worked from home. Yeah. I have not been in my office since March. Right.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. That's a long time.
And you're still gainfully employed. Like your hours aren't reduced.
My workload has remained the same. We were fortunate enough to be just as busy as we were before this all happened. We've only worked from home. And so, it proves that it can be done. It has been done. And
yeah, I think one thing that's kind of like one of the like big secrets out of it is like, even if you don't like travel, like living in Canada, in the US, and most places in Europe is so expensive. And like, if you can have a stable job, like we lived in Mexico City while I had effectively full-time working for a US company. And that's like, you get like a double raise, essentially. Wow. Like if you're like, hey, like I don't want to travel, but like maybe you want to learn Spanish, you could just move to Guadalajara or move to Mexico City, get rid of your expensive house in the States that you're paying rent on, move there, rent's less than half the price, food's like a quarter of the price.
And better, probably.
Save a ton of money.
So
like, and you could just like save a ton of money doing that.
Yeah, and we had memberships at a WeWork when we lived in Mexico City. I mean, we lived in a beautiful 1-bedroom apartment in one of the best neighborhoods, in my opinion, in Mexico City. we were able to eat out pretty much every day for way less than we pay for groceries in Canada. And the food is amazing. And we had memberships to a beautiful WeWork. And I mean, when I think about like the things that I value in life, like that's the really cool experience that we were able to have. And we had that making like not very much money. Like we were not like, we're not sitting over here like, oh, we're just like rolling in our dollar bills. Like we were working hard to, you know, grow what we were doing and that sort of thing. Like we weren't making like we were making good money, but not like, you might think, oh, you need to be rich to do that, is what I'm trying to communicate. And you don't. It's actually like the opposite way around. If you're trying to build a business or grow up your freelance work, like going to a place like Mexico is great because you can live really well. It's super affordable. You have access to great, what's the word I'm looking for?
Amenities.
Yeah. Like WeWork and that sort of thing. And yeah, I think that's one of like kind of the things that people don't think about.
That's a great
This
point.
is
I mean,
so funny because my wife and I were talking about this literally 2 nights ago. And we were talking because my wife and I have been together for coming up on 11 years. And we went all through college together. And then she went to grad school for 2 years here in Hershey. And we never, I think we each would have liked to do a break from like between school and, you know, real job. But while she was in grad school, I was working my real job. And then after grad school, she got a job pretty much immediately. You know, 6 years of schooling leaves you with a lot of debt.
Yeah.
And we were talking about how it would have been really nice to do that kind of vagabonding and trying to work while doing it. But the point that you just made, that if you are living in a cheaper area, like Southeast Asia is one of the places that I've heard a lot of digital nomads start at because it is so
Chiang Mai.
much cheaper. Yeah.
Yeah, we had
And-
when we went to Chiang Mai, probably we went Singapore, Philippines,
Malaysia,
Chiang Mai.
Yeah.
But yeah, so we get to Chiang Mai, we've got like an Airbnb. I think we paid like 900 Canadian dollars for it.
Yeah, it's like 500.
So we're
US
like,
for
oh
a
sweet,
month,
we're like
for a month.
set up. We're set up. We got like this like nice apartment, and we have a friend who we've become a lot closer with since then. And he's like, oh my god, like you guys are getting ripped off. I pay. What did Nathan pay for his place? It was like 300
$300
It's
US
like an
a
apartment.
month.
I paid like $300 for.
We were like, what? We're paying like 500, and we were like, this is cheap.
And that's for a month. Like that's equivalent to, you know, average rent in the US.
Yeah, like you can so if you have, it's probably changed a bit since then. This is 3 years ago at this point, and obviously it's, you know, an area that's growing like crazy. But you could live well there if you made $1,000 a month, which is like that's below the poverty line. One of the other kind of side benefits of lowering your income like that is as well you lower your tax burden significantly. But yeah, if you made like $1,500 a month there, like you're cruising, and then that's the type of thing where you can work a little bit less in a way that requires your focus to be on making money and work more on something that maybe requires more time but isn't as valuable. It's like maybe you have a startup idea, maybe you want to start a career as a freelancer but you don't have the skills yet. You can like do something like, I don't know, teach English or do the job you don't like doing to make money, to focus on what you want to build your career in.
Yeah. And the other side of our conversation a few nights ago was there's always this stigma that if you're doing this digital nomad lifestyle and you're roaming around the world in your 20s, making just enough money to survive in the place you're living, that you're not saving for your future when you're not able to work or when you're sick. And all of the points that we've just made are pointing towards the fact that you can save for retirement, that you can save money for a rainy day fund.
Yeah. I mean, Elliot, so I live in the New Jersey area, New Jersey, New York. On average, I think it's, maybe with the exception of Southern California, has the highest average salary of anywhere in the United States. Now, because I also live here, doesn't make me rich at all. It all averages out, right? So although my salary is high compared to someone who lives in like, Georgia, like rural Georgia or rural Alabama, it doesn't get me very far here. But yeah, I mean, if you were able to nail a job in Manhattan and work digitally with them and live in Asia, I can only imagine what a Manhattan salary would be like in Chiang Mai.
Well, I think you
Yeah,
also
or
have this
like, yeah.
argument that if you're working for these companies that expect to pay you a location salary, like that office in Manhattan, and they expect you to live in Manhattan and work at that office, but now you're working digitally, you may be able to outcompete other people that are vying for that same job by asking for a lower salary.
Ooh,
Mhm.
wow. Wow,
Yeah,
that's a
and you
good
could
point.
probably still, I mean, I think like Mexico City is a great example because it's like this really amazing city where you can have everything you need. And honestly, like I feel like it has all the same amenities virtually as any major American city. Like you could have a co-working space. I think we paid $100 a month for our co-working space. Our apartment was 800 US a month, which like my language teacher, my Spanish language teacher lives just outside of Mexico City. He thought that was like an absurd amount of money that we were paying. But like, again, like that's like living like right off Times Square type thing. Like it's like living in like the coolest area in New York. Like you would never find rent for that amount. Like a nice 1-bedroom apartment in a new building for that amount of money. And it's just like crazy to think about if you can get your expenses down to like 1,000 US dollars a month and then you're making, you know, I don't know, $80,000 a year, like you can definitely save. You can definitely have
Oh my
the
gosh.
opportunity to work on projects. You can definitely like give, your children maybe a better life and give them more opportunities. So I think that, kind of thinking about how we can take our work online and not only have these experiences, but also have these like really cool opportunities is an interesting way to think about it.
Yeah. I'm even thinking for teachers that do not work over the summers. For example, my dad and my stepmom are both professors, and they have actually been working over the summers to get supplemental income. But if they don't, that's 4 months out of the year that they are not getting paid, that they are working, or that they are paying for their mortgage, for all of these other car stuff, utilities. And if they, were living in Mexico City or Chiang Mai, they'd be paying half that and then be able to
Yeah.
travel that whole time.
Mhm.
Yeah, and I mean, if you can like rent out your house too, I mean, that's just another thing. Like
Right,
we have a
right.
friend who owns a property in Outer Banks in North Carolina, but she lives most of the year in Sayulita in Mexico. And it's super affordable to live in Sayulita and live in Mexico. And, she has been able to build her work online. And then she also teaches yoga and performs in Mexico. And she rents her Airbnb out. She's turned it into like a cute little 2-story, 2-studio apartments. And she has, a cleaner and a manager that help her with all of that. And that's part of how she pays her mortgage and supplements her income. And then she can just book it off when she wants to go home and visit. And I think that's not something we've personally done. We don't own our own place, but I think that if you do, thinking about how you could potentially rent it out or do a house swap or something like that is a way also to, I guess, just kind of release your burden a little bit, because I get it. Like if your mortgage is $1,500 a month and, maybe you're still getting paid, but you have time off, it can still feel a bit challenging and stressful to go away and spend money on travel.
Yeah, this is just amazing to me because prior to this, the vagabond had to go to Chiang Mai and get a job as a barista, or
Mm.
and you were making whatever the local salary offered you. It's just so
Which
incredible.
is challenging.
Right, right.
Yes.
Which makes it. I mean, that's like true backpacking.
Mm.
That's incredibly hard to do, and I don't think a lot of people um, would be willing to do it. And I don't think that's why as many people did it back then, as you see digital
Mhm.
nomads today.
Yeah. One of our early guests was one of Bob's friends, and she is a realtor. And as a realtor, you still have to do most of your work in the place you're living, but she was still able to make calls. But if you actually owned a few small apartments, if you saved up enough money in your early 20s, you didn't buy
Mhm.
anything, you were extremely frugal, you could technically purchase some real estate, rent it out, have a managing company, and that is your income to sustain you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, for sure. That's definitely a way that you could, travel and maybe not work or travel and do
Right.
minimal work and that sort of thing. And I think that there's a lot of options for this type of thing. Like, I hope that what
Absolutely.
listeners take away from this is like maybe expanding their horizons and their mindsets around looking at like, getting out of the mindset of like, oh, it would be so cool to live that life. It'd be so cool to do that, but I can't, to maybe looking at ways that they can. Because I think more and more, and like we said, even with this pandemic, even more, there's opportunities to do things online. And I think, we've been all over the world, and there's definitely places that are remote that would be very challenging to base yourselves in if you need good internet. But for the most part, most major cities we've been to in, Europe, Asia, Latin America have good enough amenities and internet that you can you can continue running your stuff. And there's challenges for sure, like the internet company we had in Panama would just randomly cut out sometimes, and that makes it like frustrating. But overall, like our internet was pretty much as good as it is here in Canada.
For sure.
Yeah,
Yeah.
even getting onto like one extreme, what we saw with this pandemic was doctors, medically trained doctors, and or general practice doctors who were then making their appointments online over Zoom. Because if it's just a general appointment, there's not a whole lot of physical contact needed. It's more of a catch up, how are you type of thing. I mean, if your passion is to be in the medical field and you have an equal passion to travel, exploring this route to do both would be pretty interesting to do. And you could perform these checkups online. I mean, I'm by no, I don't know the details of it or anything, but it's just, it doesn't seem like even the traditional digital nomad jobs that we kind of covered that you guys did because you did it more early on.
Mm-hmm.
We've even expanded beyond that. It's really cool to see.
Yeah, definitely.
Going.
I want to jump back for a quick second because to the internet conversation, because now that it's 2020, we have as a society developed technology that we can get internet literally anywhere via satellites. And they're not that expensive, and they're usually a one-time cost for the actual hardware, and then I think you pay a fee for the monthly. It's kind of like Verizon's MiFi, but those tether off of existing towers. This would tether off of a satellite, and you could get solid internet anywhere in the world, in the middle of the ocean.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, you could
I've heard that like you can get good speeds like down and up, but because it's traveling so far that the ping is always like there's always quite a high latency, which makes like doing certain things that require your live presence can make it a challenge. I've heard, I haven't actually used it, but like we know a lot of people who do English teaching. And what's really important there, you can work that on like a really low speed, as long as you have good ping, so like if you doing a satellite, sometimes it could be a really latent laggy call.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And I think it's really like with the internet, you really have to look at what you do, because we have friends who travel with their kids, and he'll take like contract positions that require him to be like pretty online. But then, she works as a consultant for Beauty Counter, and she's built her business up enough that they were on a cruise for 77 days that went from Florida to Florida around the tip of South America. And she was able to keep her business running. She didn't have to put on pause, anything like that. And I mean, cruise line internet is really shoddy, really sketchy. I mean, when you're en route to Antarctica, you're not getting good internet. But because she doesn't need to be on calls and doing video chats and stuff like that, she was able to work it fine. So I think part of it's like knowing what you need with internet, and then you can kind of plan accordingly, where it's like, maybe for us, if we were going to do something like that, we would have to maybe like batch podcast interviews and prep accordingly.
Yeah. And I think people have this like built-in assumption that like infrastructure is better in like, I don't know, the US, Canada, Europe. But often not the case. Like Malaysia, we had like some of the most consistent, fastest Wi-Fi speeds ever. Like a lot of times when we were back in Canada, our Wi-Fi is actually worse. Or like if you live in an apartment building that is like exclusive to Comcast in the States, like there's a good chance that your Wi-Fi is going to be way more expensive and way worse than like if you're in Romania where they have the fastest internet in the world, or anywhere in Thailand, or so many places in Asia have like incredible, affordable internet. So many places around the world. It's kind of funny working online, people have this tendency to like blame the person who's out of the country for like, oh, the connection's breaking. Like, is your Wi-Fi good? And I'm like, I have been to the office. I know the office Wi-Fi is a million times worse than my Mexican Wi-Fi, or wherever we may
It's
be.
like, it's the constant conversation with my parents. And we stayed with my parents for 3 weeks when we got back from Panama during this pandemic. Their internet sucks. Like, they have a nice house, they have nice facilities and amenities and infrastructure, and their internet is super bad. Like, there's parts of their house where you just basically don't get Wi-Fi. But it's funny because regardless of where I've been in the world, they're like, oh, your internet's breaking up. And I'm like, I'm at a WeWork in Mexico City. Like, my internet is amazing. Like, this is not me, it's you.
Yeah. I just have to back up for a second. Why does Romania have the fastest internet in the world?
So I'm not an expert on this, but I believe it's due to it not being heavily regulated. So communications regulations in so many countries like create essentially oligopolies. Like, that's what we have in Canada, where you have all these crazy rules on ownership of communications organizations. And so essentially there's a couple companies that they've got an oligopoly. They charge extremely high prices and they don't upgrade their services because they're not competing with anyone, versus I believe there, I'm not sure the specifics of it. It's just more of a free market. People can, if you're like, hey, I want to start an internet company, you just do it.
Okay. Because I did a quick Wikipedia search just to see what was going on. And there's so much information and I don't really understand all of it, but I do understand that there are nearly 700 providers for different types of internet.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So when you find traveling, it's interesting because like, Wi-Fi and internet technology, it's an area that's typically regulated by the government. And so some countries have just like shot themselves in both feet. And so you'll like show up and someone like, hey, the internet sucks everywhere here. Like, I think it's changing in Panama, but there's a company that has kind of a privileged position. I'll just call it, Cableanda. They suck. They're awful. If you go on Twitter and search Cableanda, people are like just yelling at them all the time because they don't allow any foreign competition. But then other countries where they're like, hey, there's nothing different between an internet company and like a beverage company, like come on and do business with us. Mm-hmm. Then you have amazing options that are so much more affordable than they are in other countries.
So that seems like a big thing to prioritize your travels around.
Right? Yeah, especially too, like for us, we stay most of the year in Airbnbs. And so depending on what we're doing, mm-hmm. you gotta be on top of that. Like if we're traveling to a country where like sometimes you're traveling and you just know like, hey, everywhere here has good internet. But if like when we were in Asia, for example, like going to the Philippines, there's quite bad internet, a lot of places, some places in Mexico. So we're always checking to see like if we're staying at a hotel, if there are any reviews about the Wi-Fi, or if we're at an Airbnb, message the host and be like, hey, can you do this speed test and send us a screenshot of it to make sure that we're going to be good to go when we're there.
Yeah, there's an app. You can get it on your phone called Speed Test, or you can just do speedtest.net. That's like one of our most used resources, like something that we do. I mean, even we just moved into this apartment that we're in here in Canmore, and we moved in May 1st. So just at the time of recording, about a month ago. And one of the first things that we did was speed test just to make sure, does the internet work consistently in all areas of the apartment? How fast is it? Because it's something that sometimes we just have to plan for depending on, things. So you definitely have to do your due diligence if you're going to be working and traveling when it comes to internet. And, like when we moved to Mexico City or when we spent time in Guadalajara, we looked at Airbnbs and apartments that were near to co-working spaces, and we found co-working spaces that we could work at. And part of that's because, the internet in general there can be quite shaky. And if we're not renting our own place for long term, we're not going to be able to upgrade the internet. So, there's just little things that you kind of have to pay attention to that you don't have to pay attention to necessarily as a backpacker. I mean, when we backpacked, it was just like, we showed up somewhere with bad Wi-Fi. It's like, maybe I cancel my FaceTime calls with, my two best friends and my parents, and I'm like, oh, I have to do it in the next city because it's not good enough here. Versus, that's going to be very detrimental if you're like, oh, hey boss, like, sorry, this is the last minute, but I actually can't work today because I have crap internet here in Bolivia. You can't do that when you're working. You have to be more prepared.
Right. Yeah. So depending on your job as a digital nomad, it might allow you to get to a major city, let's say Chiang Mai, for example, and you can essentially still be able to work digitally, use Chiang Mai as a satellite location. And then when you do get time off, it's when you explore the rural parts of Thailand, or, you venture into maybe Cambodia that might be a little bit more rural, something like that. But the trouble of getting there you've already went through it, and now you're there. So
that's the way we used in Mexico City. For us, it was like a hub city. It's a place we really love and love going back to now. But Mexico has a number of domestic, or at least they used to, but hopefully they'll still be the case after the pandemic, and cheap domestic air carriers. And so we got a co-working space. So it was like going to the office. We treated it like a job. Sometimes we'd leave on a Thursday, sometimes we'd leave on a Friday, but at least a couple weekends a month, we were taking flights to different cities, taking buses to different cities, using it as a kind of like a hub and wheel approach to traveling instead of, I don't know, just always adventuring.
Yeah.
Right. It seems more sustainable to do it that way too. To feel, because it is important. It feels good to be able to come home and kind of have that sense of home, and being comfortable.
And like working's tiring. Like it's a lot mentally. It can be a lot physically, emotionally, like all those types of things. And we found like one of the biggest things we learned personally when we were in Asia was that we preferred to have more time in a place. So when we started our nomad adventure, like Ryan said, we went to Singapore and we're like, a week in Singapore will be plenty, because, previously as backpackers, we'd spent maybe like 3 nights in a place. That was usually our average, unless it was like we were doing something special there, like Carnival or Spanish lessons or something like that. And we learned very quickly, like a week was pretty intense if you're trying to work like 40 of those hours essentially and then explore. It puts a lot of pressure on, okay, it's 5 p.m. Like we need to go get food. We need to go see some stuff. You don't really have that time to just decompress on the weekends. And I mean, we really do need that. We need time to just, sleep in, have like the lazy morning with, coffee and a book and that type of thing. And we just found like, okay, if we're going to do this for the long term, we need to make sure we strike this balance between like adventuring and also giving ourselves downtime from our work, because our work is demanding. And we found like it was so nice to just unpack our bags in Mexico City, and we would just take carry-on backpacks for our weekend trips, and we didn't have to haul our big bags around. And we had this like, we work kind of Monday to Friday, 9 to 5 type life. But then, on our lunch breaks and when we left the co-working space, I mean, we're in Mexico, like there's taco stands, there's people dancing on the street. We get to go like drink margaritas and eat guacamole. And on the weekends, it's like, I'm not, going on a hike or going to the mountains the way I would in Canada, which is also great. But it's like, I'm going to Guanajuato, or I'm going to the beach for the weekend. And I think that you can still get that sense of adventure while having this like stability. And I think on top of that too, it's really fun to be able to like dive into a culture and a place in a way that you normally wouldn't as a backpacker. I mean, I feel like some of my favorite places now are the places that I've spent time in: Mexico City, Guadalajara, Chiang Mai, Ubud, Panama City, the places where I've only spent 3 days, I feel like I just don't know to the same extent the way I know, Mexico City or Panama City or Atlanta, like these places where I've really got to be and live. And so I think for us, we've really found like we like those experiences of being able to be like, okay, we're locals here for the next 6 months to a year.
Right.
And not having to worry, like not having to learn about or learn the layout of a new place every night. And
totally.
You have this idea, I think, sorry to interrupt, but like, I think when you start, I think when everyone starts, you have this idea of like, I love backpacking. The thing I don't like about backpacking or doing long-term travel, kind of vagabonding, is I've seen my bank account go tick, 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 down to zero, or feeling purposeless. So working and this, it's going to be perfection. It's going to be the amazing best of both worlds. And you learn it's something different, right? It's something new. But if you're not disciplined and if you're not organized and you're not careful with the balance, you find you kind of lose the best of both sides. You're stressed when you're traveling, you're touristing, you're like, I'm thinking about work, or you're working, you're feeling like you're not doing a good job. So you need to create that structure for yourself, because it is something where it's its own thing. It's unique. It's different. It's really awesome and really enjoyable, but it's not like this freewheeling backpacking experience.
That's the great point that I kind of want to nail home. It's that the Instagram, social media in general, sort of puts this facade of digital nomading and traveling, vagabonding, that it's just all, you're just exploring temples and there's no work behind the scenes. And that was part of the reason, Elliot, we got into this, was because we wanted to understand what digital nomads did behind the scenes to actually fund their travels, because social media just doesn't do it. You see these Instagram posts and you're like, it's just not real all the time. And so that's something that's really important to nail home to people that want to do this, is that it is still, to do it as you just explained, Ryan, it still is work. You are going to have to work, and it's just not all fun. It's unless you have all the money, unless what does Rolf Potts call them? Trustafarians.
Yeah.
Trustafarians. Have you guys heard that term? Yeah. So unless you're a Trustafarian, which is for those of you who may not know what that is, it's someone who travels for maybe a spiritual journey or something along those lines, but uses the trust fund that their parents set aside for them, and
trust
didn't necessarily. Yeah, they're trust fund babies, and so, but so there is a lot of work that goes into the behind the scenes of this, not only on actual physically working and making money, but logistically planning this out, understanding, your route, how you're going to do this, how you're going to do it for a long period of time, and develop the sustainable practices that allow you to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that there's something really, I mean, I don't have a trust fund, so maybe I don't know what the experience of being a Trustafarian is like, but I feel like there's something really rewarding about, being able to live somewhere and putting yourself outside your comfort zone there, and, fund your travels and do cool things on the weekend, but then also like build something that you feel excited about, or be a part of something that you feel excited about. I think that that's, as humans, I think that we really seek meaning and purpose. And I think that's why a lot of people love to travel. I mean, I think we feel like, oh, I'm seeing this world through these new lenses, and it's really incredible to experience that. But when you can, do that and also have fulfillment in your career, I think that that's like, I mean, that's kind of like the best of both worlds, right?
It really is.
That's like my American dream. That's what I think of when I think of the American dream.
Ryan, when you were describing what life was like for you guys working and then playing in the new cities, it reminded me very, very much of a study abroad. And I don't know if either of you had an opportunity to study abroad at university, but
No, we didn't.
We had a conversation with Rolf Potts about that, about kids almost having a mandatory study abroad, even in like a business degree or a medical degree, because I think it opens up so much opportunity and so much perspective that you're not going to get from just staying at the place. Because
I think. Oh, sorry, continue.
No, that's all. I was just going to ramble a little bit more.
Oh yeah, I was going to say though, like, I think that's something I think back. Like we both like thought a lot about kind of the effectiveness of university, and like I just think, especially if you're taking on debt to do it in like a significant way, like you would in the States, that it's not worth it at all, unless you're like very set on certain specific professions. But like so many people get like locked into these incredible amounts of debt that direct the next 20 years of their life to do these things where like, I don't know if as you like learn your own skills, like as you learn to podcast or whatever, the thought of like taking a course on podcasting from a university is like nonsensical. It's like they would be teaching you stuff from like 10 years ago. It'd be so bad, but we accept it. Anyways, studying abroad though, I think would make that experience so much more valuable. And we talked about so much. We spent 4 years of university, which was fun. We learned a lot of life skills. We made a lot of questionable decisions during that time, which we learned from. But 6 months of backpacking, the maturity you get out of that is so far beyond the maturity that you get out of. I mean, I think I got more out of 6 months of traveling than 4 years of university in terms of like growing up, maturing, learning about how things work in the world. But yeah, I mean, maybe it's closer to the neighborhood, but it's like, how many more times is that? Like 8 times, 10 times more rapid learning from that.
Right. Yeah. I mean, sitting in university, sitting in a classroom, you're learning about the world from a book. Traveling for 6 months, you're learning about the world. You're getting firsthand experience. You're truly learning about the world. Now, I mean, as you mentioned already, Ryan, like certain professions require you to go to university and get that degree.
Mhm.
But I would really strongly suggest anybody who maybe is unsure about what they want to do with their lives to learn about the world first before you
Mhm.
sit and do it
Yeah.
behind a teacher and with a book. Go and do it. And we just gave a ton of reasons and ways you can do it. Man,
Yeah, yeah. I mean, if
Yeah.
you are coming out of high school and you don't have, money to travel, I mean, one, you could get like a summer job just, working at Starbucks or Chick-fil-A or McDonald's, something that's, I mean, it's going to be minimum wage and it's not going to be
Amazon
most fun.
warehousing.
Yeah, like you'll
Yeah.
learn a ton from that experience though, and you could save a little bit of money, especially if you're still living with your parents. And then, go out and see if you can find opportunities on the internet and go experience the world. Like, oh,
Uh,
We're still here.
We're still here.
oh,
sorry,
sorry.
my parents just started calling me, and it came through because our computer's connected to the account.
That's weird.
No
I'll just keep
worries.
talking.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think you can get, a lot of life experience and a lot of just a lot of learning. Like I remember for me, I was 22, I guess, when we went on our first backpacking trip, and we started in Iceland and then we went to the UK and Ireland and did that. And then we went to Spain. And I mean, my Spanish was basically non-existent at that point. I'd taken a couple classes in high school, but I mean, you got to remember I'm from Western Canada. Nobody speaks Spanish over here. So it was very, very mediocre learning. And I remember like feeling very outside of my comfort zone, like very uncomfortable. And it was challenging to communicate with people. And that was one of my biggest growth experiences in my early 20s, is just feeling like I don't I don't know how to speak this language. I don't know how to communicate with people, but I have no option. I mean, I either go back to an English speaking country or I figure it out. And I was like, I'm not going home, so I'm going to figure it out. So I think that, however you do travel, it's going to be beneficial and it's going to give you really great learning. And I think, for anyone listening who's maybe in university and wants to keep studying, definitely look into a study abroad program. We have lots of friends who have done that. And I have never met a single person who studied abroad who was like, I had a terrible time.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
or
Right.
crafting your own study abroad program, right? Like
That's a good idea.
like a lot of these study abroad programs charge you like outrageous amounts of money. Like you pay a semester of tuition, which like the idea of paying, however many thousands of dollars it is for a semester of tuition. A lot of times you could just take that money, take 6 months, pay rent wherever you are, maybe take courses at a local university. Like you can sign up at a local university to take some courses if you feel like it, and learn in that way. You can do a lot of things yourself that don't require you to, take on a ton of debt or pay someone for something that isn't as valuable.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Why would you at this point? I mean, something that I've thought of when it comes to university and understanding, deciding whether or not you should go. Like for my daughter, for example, not I want her to go, but because I think it is truly valuable, and in the United States, even if you don't use it, having that document is incredibly important. It just is. It's the way our country is just kind of made, and you really need it to get certain jobs, but it's not about just go because you have to go, like I think it was traditionally. I think it's about understanding your passion and developing your passion. And if you want to be an NBA star, um, yeah, maybe an NBA star is not the thing, but let's just kind of go with it. If you want to be an NBA star and you want to go in that direction, you need to eventually come to a point where it's like, am I good enough? And if you are real with yourself and you might not be good enough, it's like, okay, well, how else do I explore my passion? And that might be by going to university for business to become an MBA.
Manager.
You want to start
GM.
a coaching
Yeah.
program, or you want to open a basketball retail store. And that's how I think you should go about university. You don't just go, but you you go with your passion in mind, regardless of what it is. I don't know. I feel like I'm going off of a tangent here, but to tie it back in, traveling can help you develop your passion, I guess, is ultimately what I was trying to get at. And going on this little 6 month stint or whatever it is, this gap year, and then bringing that information and that knowledge back with you can help direct what you do with your time at university, if you
Yeah.
eventually do decide to go that route. Is
Yeah,
that
100%. I
that's kind of
think,
like a full
yeah, no, no, no.
loop? Yeah,
You
sorry about
connected
that.
that well.
Yeah,
No, no, no. You
yeah.
brought it back well. I think like one of the things we really found, especially with our second trip, which we were intentional about, we'd quit these jobs that we didn't love, and we were kind of looking at, okay, like what do we want to do for the rest of our lives? Like what is really like the purpose and meaning of life, and what's going to bring us purpose personally? And I think that being able to get to a place where you kind of feel bored is really important. Like we had been working in this environment where, we were both required to be at work at 8:30, and we had to be in the office at that time. We had to work to certain times. And that's a lot of what we go through in life as humans, especially if we go to school, we go to university, we go into work. And there's something about like waking up in a new place where you're kind of uncomfortable and having this total autonomy over your own life. And I feel like it's in those moments where you're like, what do I want to do today? How do I want to spend my morning? How am I going to spend my afternoon? Where do I want to sleep tomorrow? That you kind of start to get to know really who you are and what you love to do. And I think for us, that was like really invaluable time and experience that we gave ourselves, because it kind of allowed us to connect to this idea that what we'd been doing hadn't been working and hadn't been serving us. And okay, what's our next move? We're not really sure, but let's like take a step towards that. Let's get jobs that pay our bills, that are going to be exciting and give us skills, and then figure out what our next thing is. And we're like, okay, we want to blend this like travel and work. Okay, how do we want to do that? What are we excited about? So I think that, in many ways, travel can be, the catalyst to kind of figuring out what you're really excited about while giving you these really great life experiences.
Yeah.
Very
Yeah.
much agree.
Can we take a moment to, well, I'm going to give you time to plug your podcast, but to discuss how polar opposites the conversations were when I was on your podcast compared to this conversation. It's pretty funny. And that sheds light on the differences on the trajectories that we've taken. I never did the gap year. I went to university, or college here, as we call it in the United States.
Yeah.
And then got a job, and I've been working full time since my early 20s. And so I've developed a career over the past decade, but my travel is so limited. And I talk to people like yourselves who have done it for so long, and not to say that I regret anything I've done, but man, I really wish I got those experiences earlier, because who knows where I would have been today. But I find it really funny how different these conversations were, because if you're listening to this, I was on the World Wanderers podcast, and I went over how to plan a trip in a very detailed fashion because of having limited time to travel.
You're a product of your situation.
Due to time constraints associated with having a mortgage and being married and having a family and all that stuff, early on. Yeah. Go ahead, Ryan.
Yeah. And something we talked about was this idea of like, on our conversation was this idea of people. There's a lot of people who are like kind of religious about travel. Like you have to do it this certain way, but travel, and I think a life well lived in general, is about recognizing kind of where you're at, making decisions, and kind of like leaning into your life circumstances. And so like there's nothing wrong with not being a nomad, of course. Like for us, our personality types, our interests, our goals, and our vision, this is something that like brings us alive. And we learned, like working in the same city, going to the same office every single day, that repetitive thing, it was like spiritually, like we were like the fire
Draining.
in our soul was like running out of fuel, right? And so I think the thing that's wrong in life is to live a life that you're not committed to, that you don't believe in, right? So if you're like going or doing nomad life, and you're like, hey, I'm not happy, like I feel I'm seeing things and I don't really care, like I don't care about this church, I don't care about this pagoda, maybe you're someone who's more, your values are more in line with family, with stability, with security, and it's like great to be at home and then have small doses, and the vice versa. Like if you're at home, you hate your job, you're kind of depressed, you find like you're making good money but you're not saving any of that money, maybe you need some more adventure in your life. Maybe you're living for status and for money, and you're not living for your own values. So it's about kind of tuning into what you really care about and leaning into that, not necessarily about any one style of life.
Right.
Yeah, for sure. And I think, I was just going to add too, like Bob, I think that one of the things I really loved about our conversation is that there are a lot of people who are working full time right now. And, especially in the US, there's not a ton of vacation time. And, some people are doing it because that's what they love to do. And that's amazing. Like we're not here to shit on people who have full-time jobs. Like if you love your full-time job, that's amazing. Like I'm stoked for that. But if you want, more adventure and to use your vacation time, I mean, what you're providing people with by helping them plan a great itinerary means they can experience the world in a way that, really allows them to take advantage of that time. And we're like big proponents about like travel in whatever way that feels good for you. Like the way that we travel is not the be all end all. Everyone is different. Everyone has different personalities, different likes. And I think that that's amazing. I think it's like tuning into that and figuring out what you want to do. If you want to go to the middle of nowhere and spend the rest of your life there, like, yeah, go for it. If you like going to cities and doing everything that's in the guidebook, yeah, do that. If you want to go to London and only drink Starbucks and not try any other coffee places, I'm cool with that. Like, I think it's just like finding a way that you can kind of experience other places in a way that makes you feel excited.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, Elliot, you've brought this up before. The reason that you don't think you would be fit for the digital nomad lifestyle is because you really value a sense of community, right? You want to be home.
I do value sense of community, but I feel the conversation that Amanda and I had, not you, Amanda, my Amanda.
Is your wife's name Amanda?
Yes.
I was like, what conversation did we have?
Is that I really like slow travel. So the study abroad that I did in Bonn, Germany made me feel that sense of community, like understanding the place, understanding the locals. And that is how I would prefer to travel. And your points that we've all kind of been making and that Rolf Potts made in his Vagabonding book is that any way you travel is your philosophy and no way you travel is a higher moral ground than anyone else's.
Yeah.
100%. Yeah. Yeah. And I think too, like, community is something that is challenging when you don't live in one place. It's something we were actually just talking about this yesterday. I mean, we've called Canmore home since 2014, but realistically since the fall of 2015, I mean, we've probably only spent a year in total here in the last 5 years. I mean, that's not enough to really be like, have your day-to-day group of friends and the people that call you every weekend to do things. And, there's certainly trade-offs with every lifestyle you choose. And I know lots of people who want to have a house and not travel with a backpack and, just go away for periods of time and come home and have their friends and their family nearby. And I think that that's great. I think it's good to acknowledge that about yourself and know, and then figure out if you still have this craving for travel, which I assume people listening do, figure out how you can kind of, fit it in. And one other thing I'll say, just to the digital nomad side of things, we have quite a few friends in the US from living there who have started kind of working and traveling, but within their own country. So that's another option too. Like if you feel uncomfortable by the idea of going somewhere else, or you want to start by just exploring where you're from, I think that that's really cool too, especially US, Canada, very, very large geographical countries, tons of cities to explore, tons of landscapes to experience. We have a friend who works remotely who lives just outside of Pittsburgh right now. And she spent, prior to the pandemic, a number of months just living in different cities to see if she can figure out another city that kind of really serves her for settling down and building her community. And right now, most of her community is online. So she's, tried out Denver and Austin and spent time in Atlanta. And that can be a fun way to, experience different places while kind of having this like nomadic experience. Yeah. So
I think that may be the next 2 to 3 years of travel in this country, in the US.
Yeah, I mean, right now we have no idea if our borders are ever going to open up again and stuff like that. So, I mean, that's something we've thought about once it's okay for us to travel provincially. There's many places that we haven't been to in Canada, and we could certainly do, road trips or go try out a different city here, live there for a couple months, just explore a little bit more. So there's always ways that you can get adventure into your life.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So we are coming to the end. And before we get to our rapid fire questions, I would like to ask you guys to share your podcast again and anything else that you'd like to share via social media or websites.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks for the opportunity to share. You can find pretty much everything that we have going on for The World Wanderers at theworldwanderers.com. You can also find The World Wanderers on any place that you get your podcast. So wherever you have downloaded this episode from, just search The World Wanderers and you'll find us, Apple, Spotify, Google Play, Stitcher, all that good stuff. If you are interested in learning more about becoming a nomad, like Ryan said early on, we have like an actual podcast series on digital nomad life. It's for our Patreon community, and it's at patreon.com/The World Wanders. And we're always available for, questions, anything like that. So you can find us on Facebook, Instagram, send us a DM. It's The World Wanderers podcast.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, your website, everything. You've been doing it for a bit of time now, and there's so much information there. So I highly recommend people check it out.
Yeah.
Thanks.
All right. So
labyrinth of blog posts.
So the way we've been doing this rapid fire questions with two guests is I will always ask Amanda, and Bob will always ask Ryan.
Okay.
But we'll alternate. So I'll ask number 1 to Amanda, and then Bob will ask number 2 to Ryan, but you'll both answer. Does that make sense?
Okay.
Yeah. So Elliot will ask number 1. Amanda, you answer first. Ryan, you answer second. Then we flip flop. So
we both answer both questions.
Yeah.
Yes.
This is something.
Well, there's 12.
There's 12 questions.
Okay.
So
there's 12.
We'll be quick.
By the way, we do rapid fire questions.
No, we love this. It's great.
So whatever comes to your mind first. All right. What is the first word that comes to your mind when you hear the word travel?
Adventure.
I just had tacos come into my mind.
All right.
That works.
So what home comfort do you miss the most while traveling?
So there's a drink. It's like a Canadian version of a Bloody Mary. It's called a Caesar. We use clamato juice and have a few small differences. That's like one of the things. It's kind of weird, but when we come home, like we're diving into like a bunch of Caesars for a while.
I'm gonna have to try that.
Yeah, I would second that one as well. I always miss Caesars when I leave. And also, this is a kind of weird one, but I really love taking baths. And there's a lot of countries in the world where it's not normal to have a bathtub. And so our apartment in Panama, our apartment in Mexico, our apartment in Guadalajara didn't have a bathtub. And I really miss bathing.
It's a good one.
All right. All right, Amanda, if you could swim in any liquid, what would it be?
Oh, wow. That is an interesting question. I would love to dive into a bowl of Jell-O.
All right.
Ooh, so I love swimming in really cold water. Like just that feeling is like so invigorating and it makes me feel so alive. So actually later today we're going to go for a hike and then jump into one of the lakes near here. But in the spirit of the question being something weird, one of the things that came to my mind was eggnog. I'm a big eggnog fan. I feel like that would be an
Warm or
interesting
cold?
experience. Cold.
All right.
Cool eggnog.
Eggnog.
Cool.
I'll be
Cool
curious
eggnog.
to see if we ever get that answer again.
I mean, lukewarm.
No.
Lukewarm. That would be like a bacteria cesspool. So we need a bit of refrigeration going.
Okay.
Also, definitely no one swam there before.
Ryan, pick 2 animals that you want to see fight.
Ooh. That's a hard question. I'm going to go with a hippopotamus and a rhinoceros.
Oh,
okay.
Two tanks.
Yeah.
I was going to say a hippo and a lion.
Okay.
All right.
All right,
Amanda, would
I
you
feel like
rather...
it's always interesting watching hippos. I don't know if you guys have been in this rabbit hole. They're so vicious. You can find videos on YouTube of them just messing people up. And they're so unsuspecting. It's just like, oh, look at this friendly hippo.
They're so rattled.
They're the most dangerous animal in Africa, I believe.
Yeah.
They kill more people than any other animal. Yeah.
I mean, with
Yeah,
9-inch, 1-inch diameter teeth, it's like getting punched with a bullet.
Yeah. Hashtag National Geographic. Go ahead, Elliot.
All right, Amanda. Would you rather drink wine or coffee for the rest of your life?
Oh, that's hard. Wine.
All right.
I'm going coffee.
Okay.
All right, Ryan. Say hello in your favorite language.
Hola.
Hola.
Amanda, if you can travel with anyone in the world, living or dead, who would it be? Not Ryan.
Oh, damn it. I was like Ryan, obviously. Living or dead. Ooh, this is really hard. feel like it'd be fun to travel with Dumbledore. He's not living or dead. He's just fake. But I think he would be a cool travel partner.
Yeah.
Oof. This is a really hard question.
This is the hardest one so far.
There's a lot of people to go through.
Yeah.
I'm going to say one thing that's coming to my mind, if I thought about this longer, I might have a different answer, would be Arthur Conan Doyle, the author of Sherlock Holmes. I feel like he'd be like a really interesting dude who'd have some cool information.
Yeah, that's a good
to,
answer.
like pick his brain and experiencing things with him.
Yeah.
That's a better answer than mine.
No one said Anthony Bourdain yet, which I find interesting. I'm waiting for that one to be answered, by the way.
Is that
I
yours?
feel like going for like a weekend with Anthony Bourdain would be fun, but like going for an extended period of time, I just don't feel like I could keep up. Well, I mean, obviously RIP, but like it would be hard.
Yes.
Right. All right. Ryan, what is one item remaining on your bucket list?
Ooh, I really want to take a train from Europe to Asia. So you can like take a train from Hong Kong through China to Russia and then take the Trans-Siberian to Europe and go all the way to London. I feel like that would be an amazing experience.
Our 65th episode is a girl who traveled from China on the Trans-Mongolian Railway to Moscow.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
We'll have to listen to that one.
How did you remember the number episode, dude? You're good.
Yeah, that's really impressive.
Because I was going through some YouTube videos yesterday.
Nice. Yeah, that one's definitely on my bucket list as well. And I would also say high on my bucket list is an African safari of some sort. I don't know where or what park, but I'd really like to do that.
Right. Amanda, who is your biggest celebrity crush?
Ooh. Kit Harington.
Nice.
Jon Snow.
Yeah.
Jon Snow fan.
Yeah. Who is it?
I feel like Natalie Portman has always had like a place in my heart.
A soft spot.
Yeah, I mean Star Wars. She was,
Number 10, Bob?
Oh, is it? It's me. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah. Ryan, if you were stuck in one city for the rest of your life, which city would you choose?
Oh, that's such a hard question. I feel like there'd be so many other things I would want to know before making this decision, but it kind of scares me to think about being there for the rest of my life. This is a place that I like in shorter doses, but I'm going with Mexico City. Okay. So I think people who have been there are like in love with Mexico City, and people who haven't are like Mexico City. But it's such an amazing place that's so close to where we are that has so much to offer.
I was worried about your answer. I was like, do we get to live together for the rest of our lives? And I was going to go Mexico City too.
Oh, that's good.
Nice,
that's good.
Nice.
All right. Number 11, second to last question. Amanda, if you owned a yacht, what would you name it?
Ooh, so I'm big on naming things that don't have like that aren't personified. My car has the name and stuff. I feel like I would really need to like experience the yacht to fully know. But I feel like Bertha is coming to mind. I feel like having like a big Bertha would be great.
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like yacht people often name yachts things that are like come across as just so douchey.
Like Big Bertha?
No. Like, I don't know, like Freedom or like Spirit of the Sea or, just stuff like that. It's like, I feel like giving it a person's name could be cool. Maybe like Frank.
I like Frank.
I like it. Just Frank.
Frank and Bertha.
Okay. Before I ask the last question, do you guys know the story of Bodie McBoatface?
Yeah, no, we have not had a Yachty McYachtface answer yet.
No. Oh, there was an internet poll where a boat company was asking people for help naming their boat, and the poll came back, and the most answered name was Bodie McBoatface, and the company refused to name it that.
So amazing.
Yep.
And
we're the weirdest species.
There was actually
really
one funny story related. There's a place, so near where I grew up, there's a city called Kelowna, and there's a city across from Kelowna that didn't have like an official name. Some people called West Kelowna, some people called West Bank, some people called it West Side. And so then they were like, okay, like we need to like officialize, we're becoming our own municipality, we need to create a name. And so they did like a poll to get to the referendum stage. And I can't remember the name, it was like shit town or poop town or poopville, collected enough signatures to be included on the ballot, but then they refused to put it on.
Wow. People,
That's
man.
great. All right.
All right, Bob, answer. Question.
Last question.
I don't know. Ask it.
Who is your favorite Travelers Blueprint podcast host?
Oh my God, I can't answer that. You guys are both great.
Yeah, I'm gonna abstain from.
Okay, all right.
That's fine. I'm surprised you guys didn't pick Bob though, since he came on yours.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. We enjoy making our guests feel awkward right before they go. So
yeah.
All right. Well, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. We learned a ton today. I learned a ton. Elliot, you?
Oh my God, so much.
Yeah. So we really appreciate your time and thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks so much for having us. This conversation was awesome.
I think this is the first time I realized how feasible living in another city is, with the combination of talking to Amanda and Ryan about their time living in Mexico City and working for American companies still, and now knowing that working from home is completely feasible after, I mean, if it's a silver lining to the coronavirus, it's that I've learned that I can work from home, with the exception of a few times going into the office or having in-person meetings. But it's really changed my perspective on realistically living abroad.
Yeah, I agree with you, because before COVID-19, not that you couldn't work for an American company and live in another country, it just seemed less likely, less common. So if you were to live in Oaxaca, Mexico, or somewhere like that, you would assume that you'd have to find a job in Oaxaca to maintain your finances to live there. But now, if you can work digitally and pull an American salary while living in Oaxaca, you're going to have a good time.
Yeah.
It's going to be a lot of fun. And
Yeah. With the Wi-Fi situation too. Like, I think it was this is the first time I realized that, the Wi-Fi and internet in the US isn't really the greatest in the world.
Right. Isn't the greatest somewhere in Europe, like Eastern Europe?
I think it's the Czech Republic,
is
right?
Is it? Yeah, it was somewhere. I remember talking about that with somebody at some point. It might have been Ryan.
Yeah, I think it was in this conversation.
I think it was. You're right. It was Ryan.
But yeah, it's just so crazy to think about.
Yeah, it is. And it's my wife won't do it. I've already tried. Believe me, I'd be gone. I would love to live in Costa Rica, and maybe one day it'll happen or it'll become a reality. But right now we're settled down.
Yeah.
But yeah,
I know enjoy where you're at.
Yeah, working on it. I know you are more likely to be mobile, right? You're kind of already throwing around the idea of, you said Spain at some point, and
yeah, we've tossed around the idea for a while. But I mean, obviously, I think we're going to stay in the States until our kids graduate from college or.
Oh, you're here for a while then.
Yeah. Anyway, reach out to us on Facebook or Instagram, or shoot us a message at thetravelersblueprint@gmail.com if you have any questions, suggestions on guests. Follow us on all of our social media. Please, if you give us a rating, there is a high probability we will read it on the show in one of our intros or outros. And we've done that. We haven't had any ratings recently, and we really miss getting your feedback. So please do that. It takes less than a minute. And you know what? We really, really appreciate your time listening. We appreciate that you're fans of the show. It's been not a long 2 years. It's actually been a very short 2 years doing this show, and it's been really fun. So thank you.